Hi friends, in this video we are going to see the first chapter in the brief history of modern India, that is sources of modern Indian history from the Spectrum book, which is the most recommended book for UPSC preparation. So let's begin. This is not a very important chapter in the exam point of view, but it's a very interesting chapter, and it's very important that before we study the history we need to understand the sources of modern Indian history. Okay, so let's begin. Sources of modern Indian history. The first and the most reliable source of Indian history is the archives. We call it as Afile Kagar in Hindi. In Tamil, we say it is Kapagam, and in Malayalam, we say it is Shegaram. And so it's very important source of modern Indian history, most reliable, because you had all the records and documents produced for rather administrative, for legal, for social, commercial activities, and this became the archives. So, archives are places where the historical records are kept, and these records are not you're produced for the historians intentionally, but then it became a great source of information for the historians to refer and interpret to write the history of India. So you had a lot of official government records. These official government records were great use for it was of great use for the historians. For example, you had the East India Company before between 1600 to 1857, and then you had the British Crown itself governing India. That is between 1857 to 1947, and then you had other European powers, like you had the Portuguese, Dutch, French, and Danish, and you had other sources of information from newspapers and journals, and then you had a lot of information from oral evidence, people speaking out their experiences, and then you had a lot of literatures which came out during those time, and then you had the paintings reveal the culture and the economic condition and the views of people during those time. So these were all the important sources of Indian history. We can actually categorize these into four. You have the archives, and then you have the newspapers and journals, and then you have the biographies and memos and travel accounts. Biographies are something when you write the life history of a person, and then memos are some is like when you write the incidents happening in your life, any specific incidents. So it will help you to understand the history of those time. And then you have creative writing, oral evidence, and paintings. So these are the main categories from which the sources these are the sources from which the historical information has been derived by the historians. Okay, now archival materials are those materials which can be kept in an archive. For example, you have a lot of your documents and records. So these can be categorized again into central government archives, state government archives, and then records of intermediate offices, and then you have the judicial records. So these are sometimes kept as public archives, then or private, and others, and sometimes they are kept abroad also. And again, it can be categorized like public, as I told earlier. Public means central government, state government, then archives of the three presidencies, then judicial records. So these come under the category of public archives. Then private is in the hands of individuals or in the hands of families. And foreign repositories also is a great source of archival materials. They also had a lot of archival materials. You had the British over us, ruling over us. You had the Portuguese. You had the uh, Danish people, Dutch people, and you had the French people. And then moving into detail of central government archives, mainly they are present in the National Archives of India in New Delhi. And then East India Company, all the government, they had a lot of branches, public branches, judicial branches, legislative branches. So each of these branches produced a lot of records, and it revealed the policies prevailing those time, the religious policy, the social policies, educative policies. So these were a great help to understand the history of India for the historians. And then you had the James Rennell was appointed as the first Surveyor General of Bengal in 1767. So he was the first person appointed. So after that, so many surveyors came into existence, and these surveys not only they helped us to understand the geographical extent of our country, they also helped us to understand the socio-economic condition prevailing those time. They also wrote journals, they also wrote a lot of records, so this reveals a lot of information of that time. And then you had the records of reform office. Actually, the records of reform is a part of Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Pensions. Actually, this have information regarding the constitutional development, laws and everything that was passed during those time from 1920 to 1937, our present year. So it revealed a lot of information, uh, the legislative processes and all the laws which came out that time, a present year in the records of reform office. And then archives of state government, you had a lot of British provinces, a lot of princely states, and other foreign administrative areas. For example, you had the Khalsa Darbar or the Kingdom of Lahore, and you had a lot of information from 1800 to 1849 stored up here. And the Peshwa Daftar, if you get to know the understand the Maratha history for a century, this Peshwa Daftar is present in the Pune. And then you had other princely state Rajasthan, whose archives are present in Bikina. And then you had Karnataka, Mysore is also a princely state. Then the Dogra rule in Jammu and Kashmir in 1846, they got a lot of information. And then Madhya Pradesh, you had Gwalior, Indore, Bhopal, and Rewa. These are all indoors. They're all princely states. So we got a lot of information from these princely states as well. And then again, the archives of three presidencies. As I told earlier, there are a lot of there were mainly three presidencies: Bengal, Madras, and Bombay during this time. And Fort William. So the Fort William is a part of Bengal, and it is having all the information uh, after the battle of Plassey. Actually, in 1756, the Black Hole tragedy happened. That is, many British were trapped inside a room, and many died, and this resulted in a lot of agitation and how kind of uh, the British thought that Indians are not good at all. They are fit for nothing. And this resulted in a kind of revenge attitude. And in 1757, again, uh, British was able to, the East India Company was able to defeat the Nawab. Okay, so after the Battle of Plassey, all the informations are present in the Fort William, but before that, all are lost. Especially after the Black Hole tragedy in 1756, it is lost, and in 1757 you had the Battle of Plassey. So after the Plassey War, that is after 1757, all the records are preserved in Fort William. And about the Fort St. George, it's the part of Madras Presidency. You get to know the history of South India and the Deccan, and you also have all the Anglo-Indian, Anglo-French struggles, and then other conflict of British with other European powers. You get all the information regarding that here. And then you have the Bombay Maharashtra Secretariat Record Office. It has the history of Western India, mainly the Maharashtra, Gujarat, Sindh, then Kannada speaking districts in 1956. Then archives of other European powers, you had Portuguese. So the capital of Portuguese is Lisbon. So that time you had the reports and orders going from Lisbon to Goa, from Goa to Lisbon. So these records are stored up here and there in Goa as well as in Lisbon. And you had the Dutch archives, Chinsura. So all the records are present in the Bengal archives. Cochin and Malabar was also part of, the Dutch were actually living there. So the Madras Record Office has got all the records. And then the Danish, that is people from Denmark, they also were lived in Trakimpur and Serampur. So these some were taken to Copenhagen, and some are still preserved in Madras Record Office. This Recumber and Serampore, this Danish people, they are sold to East India Company during 1845. Then the French archives, Chandanagur and Pondicherry. So this was somewhere taken to Paris. Still, it will be there in the Madras Record Office also. And then Judicial Records. The earliest judicial records, that is from 1689, it is present in the Madras Record Office, and the archives of the Madras Mayor's Court at the Fort St. George. Okay, and then you had, as I told, for the Fort Williams, the pre-Plassey is lost. All the information, all the records of before 1757, that is pre-Plassey era, everything is lost. But then after that, 1757 to 70 and 73 are present in the Supreme Court of Bengal, and they are all present in the Calcutta High Court Record Office. Okay, so you can see the picture. You can see Robert Clive. He's a part of East Indian Company, and he defeated the Nawab. Okay, on in 1767 during the Plassey War. And then again, the Maharashtra Secretariat of Record Office, all the mayor's court, it is established. The mayor's court was established in 1728, so all the records are there. Then the Recorder's Court and the Supreme Court also had the archives. And published archives of East India Company and Government of India. You had a lot of government papers from the provincial government as well as from the central government, like for example the parliamentary committees weekly gazettes. Okay, and then they have produced parliamentary papers, and then royal commissions on education, civil reforms and famines. So a lot of commissions were set up during those time, and their reports, and then the legislative reports, laws and regulations. So these were also helpful in understanding the history during those time. Then foreign repositories. Actually, I told that we had foreign powers ruling over us. The first and foremost are the British. Uh, British repositories, Indian office records is present in London, which contains all the minutes and correspondence of all the commissioners. So they had a lot of meetings. So the minutes of the meetings are present in the uh, Indian Record Office, and you had a lot of missionaries. So these missionaries helped us to understand the social development and economic development prevailing those times. They wrote a lot of literatures, a lot of journals. So they have produced oral evidence. So these people, they reveal the social and economic condition during those time. And then the British Museum, it has a lot of collection of papers from the viceroys, secretaries of state, and other officials who were part of the Indian government during that time. Okay, and then, as I told earlier, you had France National Archives in Paris, and the Danish records are present in the Copenhagen, and the Portuguese records in Lisbon, and you had the Dutch East Indian Company, it is Ritsker Chief, and then the record office in Lahore and Peshawar, Sindh, etc. So these are foreign uh, record records. So these present in the Lahore, it's helped us to understand our history, especially India's relation with other neighboring countries like Afghanistan, Iran, etc. So this is all about foreign repositories. And then I told about biographies, memoirs, and travel accounts. You had plenty of travelers, missionaries, civil servants coming to India. All of these foreigners, they came to India, and many wrote a lot of information regarding the society they lived in. Okay, and for example, you have Bishop Heber's journal, Abbey Dubier's Hindu Manners and Customs. So these were journals. They helped us to understand the socio-economic condition. And many British travelers, you had George Foster, Benjamin Hayne, James Burness. So James Burness wrote narrative of a visit to the court of Sindh. Then Alexander Burness travels into Bokhara. Then C.G.C. Davidson, he wrote diaries of the travels and adventures in Upper India. And then John Butler, travels and adventures in the province of Assam. So these names are actually important. Sometimes it can be asked in the question in the MCQs. Okay, so these are the names of British travelers, and they wrote a lot of books, and they shared their experience when they visited our country. And non-British travelers, Victor Chekimund, okay, he wrote letters from India describing a journey in the British dominions of India, Tibet, Lahore, and Kashmir during the years 1828 to 1829, 1831. Then Baron Charles travels in Kashmir and Punjab. Then William Moorcroft. So these were some names of non-British travelers. These travel accounts were great reliable source for constructing the history of modern India. And then the newspapers. As I told earlier, newspapers and journals, they helped us to understand the history of India in a very detailed manner. Uh, you had a lot of English newspapers as well as vernacular language newspapers. So the first attempt was made actually, but then it was made by William Bolt. Okay, he was a person who resigned from the East India Company. He wanted to publish a newspaper criticizing the East India Company in 1776, but then he couldn't. And later, it was actually James Hickey in 1780. He published the first newspaper, and that was called Bengal Gazette or Calcutta General Advertiser. And Hickey, his press was also seized after 2 years because he was criticizing the government officials. Then after that, so many publications came, as Calcutta Gazette, the Madras Courier, the Bombay Herald. So these were also there during the 18th century. And then you had the newspapers. These were all entertaining the European and Anglo Indians. And later part only you had Indians writing newspapers. That is happening from the second half of the 19th century. And these powerful newspapers emerged, and they were actually published by fearless journalists, and they were mainly the part of National Congress, Indian National Congress. They were many were journalists. The people from Indian National Congress, many were journalists. For example, you can say the Hindu and the Swadeshi Mitram under the editorship of Subramania Iyer. Then Kesari and Maharatha, it was under the Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Bengali under Surendranath Banerjee, Amrita Patrika under Sisir Kumar Ghosh, then Motilal Ghosh, then Sudarak under Gopalakrishna Gokhale, then Indian Mirror under N.N. Sen, Voice of India under Dadabhai Nauroji, Hindustan and Advocate under G.P. Varma, the Tribune and Akbari in Punjab, Indu Prakash, then Gujarati in Bombay. Then so many newspapers emerged in Bengal, in Gujarati, etc. A newspaper depicted a lot of information regarding the life, especially the freedom struggle. So the newspapers which emerged from 1920s onward, 1920s, they gave a picture about the freedom struggle. And there were a lot of prejudice. Okay, the Indian newspapers run by Indian leaders, they showed everything in Indian perspective, uh, advocating Indian uh, justice. But then the British, they produced a lot of newspapers, they showed Indians in a very bad manner. And many Indians abroad, they published a lot of newspapers. Indian socialists, London, Shamji Krishnavarma, then Bande Mataram by Madame Kama, she published in Paris, and then Gadar, it was published in San Francisco by Lala Hardayal. So these helped us to understand the history. Uh, okay. And then creative literature. A lot of novelists were present during those time. For example, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. He wrote novels like Anand Mad and Vande Mataram, then Sannyasi Revolt. So it showed the life of those time. It helped us to understand the history of that time. And Tamil writers Girija Devi, Ramatirtha Tammal, Mohanra Rajani, they wrote so many novels. So it helped us to understand the social picture of those time. And G.V. Krishna Rao, he wrote the puppets in Telugu, and it showed the people's behavior. And Gujarati author Ichiram Surya Ram Desai, then Tagari Shivashankar Pilla, he wrote Totiyuda Magan and the son of a scavenger in 1948, and then Chemmin 1956. So it showed the life of people during those time. Then Vaikam Muhammad Bashir, he wrote during 1910 to 1994. So he wrote a novel, Balyakala Sagi. So it showed a lot of information about the life of people during those time. So these were the most of the literatures that existed during those time. Then paintings. The paintings, as I told earlier, they showed the picture, the culture. You had the company paintings, which is also referred as Patna Kalam. So they actually got patronage from the East Indian Company. So they showed the scenes as, uh, defending the British. Also showed the people of India. And then you had pencil drawings, etchings, posters, cartoons, bazaar prints, etc. Then it was important to understand the Great Revolt of 1857. And then you had, actually, it showed British as heroes. Okay. And for example, Thomas Jones Parker in 1857. It was an example like that. It showed his British as hero and Indians as rebels. Okay. And English woman was shown as helpless, innocent. So it helps us to understand the British perspective also, British perspective of the Indian history. And then Indian paintings, Calicut painting in Calcutta, it not only showed the mythological uh, stories, but it also helped us to understand the life of people during that time, the everyday life. So it was also depicted by these paintings. And it was like satires, then showing social evils prevailing those time, and showed the nationalism growing. Again, the paintings show how the spirit of nationalism started growing in Indian minds. Um, so the Nandalal Bose, Raja Ravi Verma, they showed how the spirit of nationalism started growing. And then you had the Bengal school, which was led by Abanindranath Tagore, who was a nephew of Rabindranath Tagore. And you have a lot of painters, they played a vital role. Even though they actually focused on a lot of sources like Indian mythology, but then even they showed the people, and so it helped us to understand the Indian history. So this is all about the sources of modern Indian history. Thank you for watching. If there are any mistakes, please forgive, and please subscribe, and also tap the bell button for more updates. Thank you so much.